Hi all, I'm Tony, this is SV Tapatya and we are building a cruising sailboat. And for reasons that you've just seen and hopefully you can understand, I'm talking to you at the moment from inside the shed, inside the workshop. Going to get straight on. Well, no, actually there's not much point in beating around the bush, and I'll give you a heads up and tell you that there's been a bit of a setback. I've done something a bit on the silly side, and I'll tell you all about that a bit later on. Going to start off with looking at what I did manage to get done this week. So let's do that. We started off, or I started off working on the tiller. I've been making up, as you know, I dare say if you're a regular viewer, I've been making up a stainless fitting for the part of the tiller that fits into the rudder, and gave that a bit of a polish up, you know, a rough polish up. It's not exactly perfect, but a rough polish up, and then fitted it to the tiller. But just before we do that, there's one thing you can do that won't cost you a penny, help us get out to a wider audience, and that's to hit that old subscribe button down there. Thanks. Now, I'm going to take it to the later, I think. That's good. That's good. So I was talking to the boat transport guy yesterday, and he tells me a couple of measurements we need. And the first one is 90 centimetres from the ground to the chine. Let's have a look. Yeah, we've got that. About 95, so nice and close. And 25 centimetres under the keel. Also brilliant, about 27 there, so that's what they need to get their trailer under the boat. That's looking good. I'm pleased with that. All perfect. That should work out. The other measurement we've got is a 4 metre maximum height, so I'll just see what we've got up to the top of the bimini. Check that. Well, it's actually just under 4 metres, which could be good, but I always was intending to take the bimini off to transport it, so I may still do that. It's close. I've got these pieces of stainless here. I've got 3 of them, and they will form an arch that goes across the aft end of the boat. It doubles as the sort of push pit, the aft railings of the boat, but its main purpose is to form an attachment for the sheet that goes to the aft of the 2 sails. And obviously it has to be very stable for that. But there's one other important consideration, and that is that the tiller has to be able to lift up high enough to give clearance to open the lazarette hatch underneath it, as you know, it may well be storing fenders and ropes and whatever in their lines, most likely, and it would be very useful to be able to lift the tiller up, open that hatch and throw the fenders in there, throw the lines in there, or of course get them out. So that's an important consideration, and I wanted to do some measurements in order to decide how high this arch has to be to fulfill its requirements. So that was the next job. Got out there, fitted the tiller again temporarily once more, took some measurements. Well, there's a list of parts that I've still got to make. It's getting ever smaller, which is a very nice situation. But one of the things I need to make is the yards, which is the topmost battens for the sails. So they're angled yards. They go up at an angle of 60 degrees, and they're about 4 meters long, roughly speaking. So I picked up just up at the local sort of do-it-yourself store a bit of this spruce. It's quite good quality spruce, just a few small knots in it. It's quite good. And the first job was to glue it up to length. The intention is to rip it down to half its size and glue 2 pieces of it together, so that the scarf joints are not in line, and to reduce the effect of any knots that might be in there. But as I say, first job was to glue it up to length. So we cut 10:1 scarf joints on the end of each piece and epoxy glued it together. Here we go. Straight, isn't it? Yeah, nice and straight. Yeah, let's come out well. Lovely. It really has come out very straight. Nice indeed. So let's get to it. What happened? Well, I was cutting some bits of black locust to make some blocks that help fit that arch to the angle of the aft bulwarks, or possibly the hull. That was all going well enough, no issue there. And what happened? Well, I'll tell you the story. Before I get to that, I was just going to say, I know sometimes in the camera, I see it myself, it looks like I'm being or taking unnecessary risks, but if you look carefully, just get that off. If you look carefully, you'll see that my hands never go over that black plastic bit that surrounds the blade. Never. I'm really, really careful. I've used table saws for 30 years. I've owned one for 25 years. This is the third one I've ever owned, and I've cut a lot. I cut a lot of wood. Down the garden there's 24 meters or cubic meters of firewood chopped, and anything that's small enough to chop on a table saw, I chop on a table saw. So I chop a lot of wood. And as I say, I have enormous respect for a table saw, and I think that's you know, it deserves enormous respect as well. We're looking at 2,000 watts of rotating sharp blade, and I had just fitted this sharp ripping blade to the saw on the day of the event, and as you saw, you know, we'd ripped the scarf joints. I was cutting these bits of black locust. It was all going nicely, and then all of a sudden the saw wouldn't start, and down here you've got the on off button down below, but there's also a thermal cutout button, and I tried the on off buttons a few times and it wouldn't run, and I tried the thermal cutout button and it wouldn't run. And well, what I've got as a setup here is that I'm going to grab the camera and show you something. What I've got as a setup here is that all power tools, and this is the one that the table saw is plugged into, are plugged into these wall sockets with on-off switches on them. You know, not the full-on professional level isolation switches, but they serve their purpose. They do, you know, allow me to switch off the power to the tools whenever I'm changing tools or doing any work on them. I've got them all over. There's one there, the lathe's in, one over the back there that the grinder's in, and that's very important to me. You know, I've done a number of safety courses, machine shop safety courses, and I know the ability to be able to isolate the power to your tools is key. But what happened was a moment of utter stupidity, and I say the saw wouldn't start, and I know from working with various electric motors that sometimes they just find a position, the motor finds a position where it won't go, and if you can just rotate it a little bit, away it goes. So what did I do? Well, I grabbed the blade and moved it a bit, and the second that I moved it, it started, because I hadn't turned the wall switch off. Well, of course I whipped my hand out as quickly as I possibly could once it started, but unfortunately managed to, well, it caught me and across, obviously on this hand, but just across the top of the index finger, and it's cut in there. And clearly a saw blade like this doesn't cut, it rips, so it's ripped the skin apart, and they've had to cut a fair bit away and stitch that back together again. But the worst thing was it's grazed the bone or cut the bone a bit. But the worst thing of all is it cut the tendon, not all the way through, but rather a lot, rather too much. And so the tendon's been stitched, and that's a rather slow heal, so I can anticipate probably 4 weeks or so with this on, which is going to slow things down. Hopefully Elizabeth's going to come out and do some work for me. She said she will, so I do hope we can still push on with the boat. I don't see it as a stop. It's going to slow things down, but we are in the very fortunate position of having most of it done. There's a few little bits around that we can get on with, smaller jobs that we can be getting on with. I've also learnt along the way that this saw is now actually broken. That's what went wrong. The motor's is not working properly. When it does start up now, it runs at distinctly less power, and it doesn't start properly anymore. So I've ordered a new saw. It'll be my 4th table saw, But this one is done brilliantly. You might remember when I bought it some 4.5 years ago, it did actually come with a 5-year guarantee, but the amount of work I've done on it is I'm not going to claim on guarantee. They're not built for that. It's been absolutely fantastic, this saw. So I bought a new one coming up. There we go. That was the story of my hand. A moment of stupidity. It wasn't even being careless, it was just pure momentarily stupid. And the table saw. And that's it for this week. My massive thanks to the lovely people who support us on Patreon and PayPal. Thank you to you for watching, and we'll see how we get on. See you next time. Bye.